Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. My name is Kanaye. I hope all you Husky fans watching have had a great Thanksgiving week. Definitely, I'm sure it was a great cherry on top seeing UConn take home a big win against Illinois yesterday at Madison Square Garden on Black Friday, 74-61. Really important getting that win, just considering you dropped that game to Arizona last Wednesday at Gamble Pavilion. Definitely put a greater level of importance on winning the games following that in this non-conference slate for UConn to finish up going into Big East play. So, of course, I'm going to be giving you guys my takeaways from UConn's win yesterday at the Garden and doing a quick preview for their upcoming matchup at Fog Allen Fieldhouse against Kansas, slated for Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But before we get into all of that, engage with the videos you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about us, whether it's this podcast, if you're a Husky fan, or the Court Storm podcast, which I do with Josh. Everything just goes a long way with influencing YouTube's algorithm, getting more people to tune into our videos. So let's get right into it. Of course, UConn took home the win 74-61. I definitely think that it was important for them to get off to a hot start in this game, and that's what they did. I know Dan Hurley had the pretty funny comment earlier in the week about how the team was going to be doing their Thanksgiving celebration on Wednesday as opposed to Thursday, which was Thanksgiving, of course, just because of his fear that the tryptophan and the turkey was going to lead to the players coming out a little sluggish or sleepy on Friday's games. Maybe that was what led to UConn getting off to the hot start. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I'm sure Dan Hurley will mark it down as he'll take the credit for it there. But nonetheless, again, hot start coming out the gate. Solo was able to bang a three home right out the bat. Alex Caravan followed it up with another three. Silas Demery was able to get it going and just being able to get to the rim, being able to hit shots off the dribble. He had 1-3 that was a good look in transition, following a three made on Illinois' end, I think, by Keaton Wagler. So it's really good to see Solo and Silas get off the hot starts. I think really for 75% of the first half, UConn probably looked as good as they could have and played probably as the best as they could have. I just think that UConn's in such a good position when those two guys, who are probably your best two perimeter offensive players, are able to get open looks, able to get to their spots and elevate, hit shots, then UConn's in such a good spot. I also think that it was definitely good. Probably should have started off with this, but considering that the team was back at nearly full strength yesterday, every player was available. Terrace Reed and Braylon Mullins were both full participants in practice in the days leading up to the Black Friday game against Illinois. And they were on minutes restrictions yesterday. I believe Dan Hurley said in his postgame presser that he wanted to kind of keep those guys to 15 minutes. And that was pretty evident. Terrace did get the start, but I definitely think he did look he looked like he was a step slow. I don't think he is fully there. I think Dan Hurley might have mentioned that Terrace is probably back a week, maybe 2 weeks ahead of when he probably should be. But Terrace, I think, just really wants to get out on the floor. And seeing, UConn drop the game to Arizona, I think definitely put a lot of motivation on his end to want to get back to help his team. And granted, Terrace, it was not the biggest factor in this game. I just think that, dealing with the injury and having to go against a really physical, big front court that Illinois has between the Visage brothers and David Berkovich, it's tough. Additionally, he also got in foul trouble as well, which was definitely something that kept him off the floor, I think, at points of the game. But Eric Riba was really good in his relief appearances for Terrace. I think Eric Riba, it's really been impressive to see where this 3-game sample size that we've had between the Arizona game, the game against Bryant, and now Illinois, the minutes he had yesterday. I just think it's really impressive to see how far he's come in really just a month alone. This was a guy that I definitely had some concerns about because he didn't have the greatest senior season. I know he struggled in the offseason practice following his really impressive showing in the FIBA U19 World Cup. Nonetheless, I think for him to have the experience of playing a high volume of minutes this early and kind of being able to play and just figure things out, play through your mistakes, it's so important. And just knowing that now, you really do have two functional centers on this team that can prove to be a great tandem going into the later stretches of the year, going into March, Big East tournament play, NCAA tournament play. It's so important to have. That's what the great UConn, Dan Hurley teams have had, a tandem at center. You had Sonogo and Klingon in the first of the two back-to-back championships. The following year, you had Klingon with Sampson backing him up. This year, I think you have a really strong tandem at center between Terrace and Eric Riba. So it's definitely good to see Eric really play well over these last 3 games, and hopefully it continues. And I just think, again, he's figuring things out. He is coming along. I definitely think he does still have some areas where he needs to improve, specifically finishing around the basket a little bit of a higher clip. Just having a little more confidence in the 3-point shot, because I think there were opportunities yesterday where he probably could have took the shot. And, there was one instance where he probably should have took the shot and kind of hesitated, decided hit the defender with a head fake and drive to the basket, but got called for the travel, took the step before the dribble. So it's just a matter of building on the confidence and just continue to improve in the areas where he needs to for Eric. But Terrace, I definitely think hopefully he is back to full strength and we'll see him without a minutes restriction against Kansas. Same thing goes for Braylon Mullins. Braylon got a few runs in the game against Illinois. He was able to knock down a midi shot. Didn't shoot the ball great yesterday, and I again think he's kind of in a role where it's tough to come in and have to play a team as good as Illinois in your first collegiate game that actually matters. And he's just figuring out what his role is on this team and what exactly he needs to do at what point of the game. So hopefully those guys will be without minutes restrictions against Kansas. I still don't know if you start Braylon right away. I think you still maybe bring him off the bench for Stewie. But nonetheless, it's great having every player on this roster available to play because that it's evident that this roster is deep, and when UConn is fully healthy, they could be damn good offensively. And I think you have Braylon in the starting lineup puts other teams in a spot defensively where it's tough to guard them because you probably have more natural fours, more natural big men having to chase Alex Caravan off of screens just because UConn puts those teams in a position where they have no choice but to, considering that you have three knockdown shooters between Solo, Braylon Mullins, and Alex Caravan. And a lot of the best teams around the country right now, they play 2 to 3 bigs. I mean, Michigan plays 3 between Yaxel, Ademara, Merez Johnson. Florida has 3 big men that they roll out. I'm forgetting some of the other teams off the top of my head, but Purdue, Trey Kaufman-Wren, Oscar Clough. So that's definitely something that's going to cause a lot of problems defensively for other teams when UConn is hitting on all cylinders when they are fully healthy. And I think that's just going to do wonders for the team, considering you get Terrace back fully healthy. That's a dimension you have. Throw a guy the ball in the post and he can go and get you 2 points or get to the line, draw a foul, hit the free throws, hopefully. And I just think it's going to make UConn's offense run so well. But something that I came across was I recently looked at UConn's KenPom rating earlier today, and they are now 14th offensively and 8th defensively in the country, which is really incredible considering that I don't know that I would have ever expected to see UConn's defensive rating ahead of their offensive rating. But that's just really good to see that they are a top 10 defense now in the country. I do have slight defensive concerns for UConn just because I felt like they got beat off the dribble at times yesterday, and I felt like they were able to get stops, but a lot of that I feel like is attributed to Illinois just missing good looks. They got a lot of great shots from 3 that they just weren't able to hit. Kylan Boswell was a huge factor in this game for Illinois. He had 25 points, really was kind of able to score at will. And that's definitely something that is a little bit of a red flag right now. I'd like to see UConn get these types of stops that they were able to get against Arizona when they went on that run to cut the 13-point deficit, as well as what we saw when they went on their runs against Illinois yesterday. Overall, though, it is good to see the defense where it is right now as opposed to where it was last year. And I think you get Terrace back on the floor, you're a much better defensive team. I think getting Braylon Mullins back is going to be important as well, just because Dan Hurley's raved about how he thinks Braylon Mullins could be a really good defender this year for this UConn program. So overall, I think it's good to see the defense much far ahead of where they were at this point in the season last year. And then offensively, really, it's just, I think it's a matter of getting everyone healthy and playing the roles that they need to play. Silas got in foul trouble, and I still think it is kind of a matter of him figuring out when to be aggressive and when not to be. I think there's definitely going to be more opportunities where you're going to see him have more of an emphasis in trying to attack guys one-on-one, get downhill, get to the basket, create off the dribble. I talked about on last week's podcast how a lot of his shots at Georgia came off the dribble, and that's already been scaled down drastically, I should say, since getting to UConn. I think that's kind of been something that's been coached out of him by the UConn staff, which is understandably so, considering that UConn's offense is really all about off-ball movement, screens, pin downs, actions. It's just all something that Silas needs to, kind of develop in a couple long as the season goes. And he's already had big moments, I think, and it's just a matter of him continuing to kind of build on what he's already done. I think overall, though, the biggest factor in this game was Malachi Smith off the bench. Malachi, it's really just so impressive to see because I really do believe that he could have started on a lot of high major teams around the country. And I was really, really shocked when he announced that he was going to be transferring to UConn, just because I didn't know that was a realistic possibility. You bring in Silas Demery just a week, maybe 2 weeks before you land Malachi. I thought that he could have looked to go a different route, but it's pretty evident that he's here because he wants to win. I mean, he's what I believe a 5th-year senior. I, again, forget off the top of my head. nonetheless, he's had some riddled injury past with Dayton, and he's at a point in his career where he's not really about the personal stuff. He wants to win. It's his last year playing college basketball. He's accepting playing a role where he's coming off the bench and being in that Hassan Diarra kind of position where 2 years ago, Hassan's coming off the bench for Tristan Newton, change of pace guard who can defend at a high level, who can play make for others. And that's what he did yesterday. I have to give him a lot of credit. He played really well when being defended by Kylan Boswell. He did really good in getting paint touches, being able to kick the ball out. He finished with 9 assists in the game. He had some huge threes down at points of the game. One earlier on, another one when UConn kind of went on that run in the second half. And then, of course, that kind of Hail Mary he threw up when Jake Davis came to foul him. He kind of just drew up the shot, banked it in off the glass. I'm still a little confused as to the whole shot clock situation that kind of transpired with that whole around the whole shot. I mean, I'm not all too certain as to exactly what happened there. Nonetheless, it was a crazy shot that pretty much put it completely out of reach for Illinois at that point in the game. So a lot of good goes to Malachi Smith there, and I'm just so happy that now UConn has 2 functional point guards on the team where last year you really didn't for most of the year, considering that, Haas kind of was battling the knee injury and probably was never over 50% playing towards the later stretches of the year last season. But overall, I just think Malachi, he's going to be so important for where this UConn team is potentially able to go. And seeing him have games like he did in what you could call a homecoming game, considering he's from the Bronx, New York, it's just great to see. Now, to talk about Alex Karaban, I think this was a great example of how Alex Karaban is so instrumental to how successful UConn can be in a basketball game. He finished with 12 points. He got on the glass. I think what was most impressive though for me was the 5 assists where Alex was able to go ahead and get paint touches. He's able to kick the ball out to find an open man from 3. And I just think that's, what you want out of Alex. I think he's, like I've come on this podcast and said, he's the best 4th option in the country. He's the best role player, glue guy, whatever you want to call it. And when he's able to do that, then UConn's just in such a good spot and being able to really just execute their offense at a high level. And really just, again, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, when he's in a spot where he has more natural big men guarding him, puts the other team's defense in a tough spot where you're chasing him, Alex, off of screens, off of staggers. It's just so hard to stay in front of him. Of course, he's not really a guy that's going to go and take you one-on-one, but just nonetheless what you can do and being able to kind of get in that hostage kind of dribble where he has a guy on his tail and he's able to kind of get into the paint and get to a floater or dunk it down or dump it down low to one of the big men in the paint, kick it out to a shooter. I just think that's so important for how UConn's offense runs. And clearly that was a great example of how good UConn's offense can be when Alex is in that position like we saw against Illinois yesterday. Now, in terms of solo ball, like I said earlier, he got up to the hot start, made the 2 threes early. One of them was an and one, but he still kind of struggled to knock down the shots with the open looks he was getting. I mean, he's continuing to get good looks like he has every game this season. He hasn't been able to be consistent in knocking them down. And I still do think he is in a way kind of looking for the foul where he kicks his legs out and is definitely trying to get to the line, I think, to get the 3 free throws. This is something that I think needs to be coached out of him and the coaches have needs to get on him about. I'm sure they're aware of it. I'm sure they've probably already talked to him. I do know that Ray Allen, who was in attendance for the game, supposedly spoke to Solo after the game, just kind of talk to him and get him going out of the shooting slump that he's kind of in right now. I think that's he's too good of a shooter for this to continue. There's got to be something going on above the shoulders where he's just not there right now. But I think it is going now probably on 3 games that we've been saying this, but I think Solo's really due to have a big night from beyond the arc. And once he does, I think that's just going to do so much for kind of getting him back on pace to being the shooter he was last year, because you need Solo to be a knockdown shooter. That's kind of what part of the way this team runs. I mean, Solo needs to be a factor from beyond the arc. And I will say it is impressive to see how he's gotten a lot better kind of getting it into those dribble pull-ups from the mid-range and being able to attack the basket a little bit more. Nonetheless, though, he is there to shoot the ball from 3. And he needs to be knocking down more threes than what we've seen out of him to start the year. Nonetheless, I'm not super worried. I think eventually it's going to correct itself. He's going to shoot the ball rather than to draw the foul. I mean, like I talked about in last week's episode, he's 6'3", 6'4", got the long wingspan. He's a great athlete, so he can elevate on his shot. Just shoot the ball to shoot the ball. I mean, he'll get there. I'm really certain of it. And once he does, then that'll, of course, really catapult the ceiling of this UConn team's offensive potential. But outside of that, I think that pretty much takes care of all of my takeaways I had regarding the Illinois game. I do know that I've heard that Illinois has canceled the return game in this series going to Chicago next year, so that's definitely something that's fairly interesting. Nonetheless, overall, it was a great win at STORRS South, great cap off to what was a great week of college basketball, of course, as a Husky fan. But to get into my preview for the Kansas game coming up for on Tuesday night, I'm not all too certain if Kansas will have Darren Peterson for this game or not. Of course, Darren Peterson, we all know, has a chance to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. He's been one of the most impressive freshmen to start the college basketball season. And he's been hurt. He sat out all players era. And I don't know as to whether Bill Self is going to rush him back maybe, or if he's in a good spot and he thinks Darren can play. We'll see. Nonetheless, though, I think that it is going to be a tough game. It's always hard to go on the road and play at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Of course, 2 years back in the 23-24 season, UConn went to Fog Allen, down Steph Castle, and with Cam Spencer playing with an ankle injury. And it took really what was an outstanding scoring display from Tristan Newton, who I believe had 31 points in that game, to kind of take UConn all the way back when they were facing a pretty large deficit. And they did have a chance to win at the end. Of course, they didn't. But, of course, Fog Allen's probably the toughest place to play in college basketball. And Kansas has some players this year. Even without Darren Peterson, I think now, after seeing what they did in the Players Era Festival, they're a second weekend team with Darren Peterson. And to see players for Kansas that really take pride in playing for the name on the front of the jersey rather than the back, I think it's a complete opposite of what Bill Self had last year, where you have Hunter Dickinson, Zeke Mayo, AJ Storr, Rylan Griffin, Dewan Harris, It just great players, but they didn't fit together. This Kansas team has a lot better connectivity. They have better cohesion. Florida Badunga's really made a jump. That was definitely a little bit of a shocker to me, just because I've always kind of felt he's more of a rim running big. Nonetheless, he's had a great start to the year. Bryson Tiller's been impressive. Trey White, Jamar McDowell, Melvin Council Jr. have all played really, really well over the last couple games for the Jayhawks. And I think that it's going to be tough. It's going to, again, really, that's kind of probably going to be the theme for a lot of the games this season. It's really going to come down to how UConn defends the perimeter players on the opposing teams. No different for this Kansas game. These are, Trey White, Melvin Council Jr., two guys who can really break you down off the dribble. Really going to look for Silas Demery, Malachi Smith to lock in on the defensive end. You'd like to see Solo Ball try to stay in front of defenders, where, I think yesterday against Illinois, he definitely got beat off the dribble several times throughout that game. And you're going to look for, hopefully, Terrace to not be on a minutes restriction, feel a little bit healthier than what he was feeling against Illinois. I think the bigs are going to be important just because Florida Badunga is so athletic. Could pose some problems for Eric Ryba. Could pose some problems for Terrace Reed. Both guys need to stay out of foul trouble. Bryson Tiller is a big who can stretch the floor. So that's definitely also going to be a little bit of a matchup problem for UConn, I think. Just seeing how the bigs might have to defend Tiller on the perimeter could definitely cause some issues on that end of the floor. And then offensively, I think overall, you really just kind of need to get back to hopefully having everyone healthy and running your offense in the way it was designed to be ran going into the season, where you have the three shooters on the floor between Solo, AK, and Braylon Mullins, if, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. And of course, that's going to cause a lot of problems for the Kansas players having to run around and guard all three guys from beyond the arc. And Silas Demery, I think there's going to be opportunities for Silas Demery to take guys one-on-one. Kansas' backcourt doesn't have great size, so I think that's definitely going to, benefit Silas on his end offensively. And I just think overall you need a wire-to-wire game. I know Kansas isn't going to be – they actually might be ranked going into Monday's AP poll now that they've picked up that win against Tennessee in the Players Era Festival. So it's definitely going to be a big game. Got to come out hot as you did against Illinois, and you got to win wire-to-wire. Overall, I think that takes care of everything I had for you guys on this episode today. Really important picking up that win against Illinois. Super excited to see the Huskies take on the Jayhawks at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. Always great seeing UConn have to go on the road and play in an atmosphere that they're probably going to be playing in on Tuesday night. But until next episode, I'll see you all next time.